We are directing our focus to a specific piece of consumer hardware today. It is a handheld digital entity that began as a toy but rapidly evolved into a global cultural icon.
Right, and it completely defined a generation's understanding of digital responsibility.
It did. It effectively paved the way for the entire genre of virtual companionship. This subject requires a serious chronological examination for you, the listener, to fully grasp its impact.
It certainly does. We're looking at the Tamagotchi franchise today. Our objective is to trace its trajectory from its inception in 1996 through the present landscape of late 2025 and early 2026.
And this is not merely a look at a passing consumer fad.
No, absolutely not. It is an analysis of a product life cycle that includes a meteoric rise, a catastrophic market crash, and then a strategic reconstruction. That reconstruction has kept the brand actively alive for 3 decades.
The mission here is to analyze the life cycle of the product, its economic impact on the manufacturer, Bandai, the psychological phenomena it triggered, and the technological evolution it has undergone. Let us begin by defining the subject matter itself.
The nomenclature provides the first clue to the product's identity. The name Tamagotchi is a portmanteau.
Combining Japanese and English terms.
Exactly. It combines the Japanese word tamago, which translates to egg, and the English word watch, which is romanized in Japanese as wachi, hence Tamagotchi. It literally translates to egg watch.
Strictly speaking, regarding the lore established by the manufacturer, what exactly is a Tamagotchi?
Technically speaking, they are described as a small alien species. The lore suggests that these aliens deposited an egg on Earth to experience what life was like here.
Which fundamentally alters the user interface experience compared to traditional gaming.
It does. The user's role is distinct from standard video game interactions of that era. You are not utilizing the device in a competitive sense. Rather, you are acting as a caretaker. The sole objective is to raise the egg into an adult creature.
The scale of this franchise is significant. Looking at the data available as of 2025, what are the sales figures we are evaluating?
As of 2025, the updated figures indicate that over 98.1 million units have been sold worldwide.
That is a staggering volume for dedicated hardware.
It is a figure that places it in the upper echelon of electronic entertainment history. When you consider this is a standalone hardware device and not software sold on a pre-existing console, that number becomes even more impressive. It speaks to a universal appeal that completely transcends the typical gamer demographic you would expect.
Let us move to the genesis of the product. We are looking at the period between 1996 and 1998. Who are the primary individuals responsible for this invention?
The creation of the device is attributed to 2 primary individuals, Akihiro Yokoi of the company WZ and Akimita of Bandai. Their operational dynamic is quite interesting.
In what capacity?
Well, Yokoi was instrumental in the conceptualization of the creature and the core mechanics, while Maita was crucial in understanding the marketing and the specific demographic appeal. Their contribution to the field was actually recognized in a rather unique way.
You are referring to the 1997 award.
Yes, the duo won the 1997 Ig Nobel Prize for Economics. This is a prize often given for unusual or trivial achievements, but in this specific case, it was awarded with a degree of affection. The committee dubbed them the father and mother of Tamagotchi.
What was the specific citation for that award?
The citation noted that they diverted millions of person-hours of work into the husbandry of virtual pets. It was a nod to the massive loss of global productivity the device caused.
Can you establish the timeline of the initial release for the listener?
The first unit was launched in the Japanese domestic market on November 23, 1996. The international rollout followed shortly after that.
With the United States release occurring on May 1st, 1997.
Correct. And it is worth noting the speed of this rollout. To go from a domestic release to a major U.S. launch in under 6 months demonstrates how quickly Bandai realized they had a massive hit on their hands. They moved with incredible urgency.
There were specific design philosophies applied to the hardware and the character aesthetics. What drove those initial manufacturing decisions?
Originally, the concept was for the device to be worn like a wristwatch.
Which aligns with the watch portion of the name we discussed earlier.
Exactly. However, cost and manufacturing constraints led to the keychain design we are familiar with. Regarding the shape of the device itself, the iconic egg shape that was chosen because reptiles, specifically snakes and turtles, were highly popular pets in Japan at that time.
So the physical casing was designed to mimic an egg.
Yes, the egg form factor was a direct nod to that exotic pet trend. grounding the alien concept in a recognizable biological reality for the consumer.
And the visual style of the characters displayed on the screen.
The characters were designed in a specific style known as heda uma. This translates roughly to bad but good or unrefined.
A deliberate aesthetic choice rather than a technical limitation.
Precisely. It was a style very popular in teen magazines of the era. It relies on a sketch-like quality that is intentionally not polished or perfect. These sketches were then converted into the pixel art that became the standard for the interface.
What was the psychological strategy behind that unrefined look?
By making the creatures look slightly helpless or imperfect, it triggered a stronger nurturing instinct in the user that a perfectly polished, flawless character might have. It made the digital entity feel vulnerable.
Who was the intended demographic for this product at launch?
Bandai initially marketed the hardware exclusively to teenage girls in Japan. That was their absolute target audience.
However, the sales data quickly proved that the appeal was much broader.
It transcended that specific demographic almost immediately. It became a cross-generational hit, appealing to businessmen, young boys, and adults alike. It tapped into a fundamental human desire to care for something, regardless of the user's age or gender.
Let us unpack the core gameplay mechanics. The hardware interface is deceptively simple.
It is very minimalist. The device relies on 3 physical buttons controlling an interface displayed on an 8-bit grayscale LCD. This screen is capable of displaying 256 shades, though the imagery you actually see is usually stark black pixels on a gray background.
How are the inputs mapped?
The buttons are generally mapped as select, confirm, and cancel, though their functions do shift slightly depending on the specific menu context you are in.
The gameplay is defined by a biological loop. How does that cycle initiate for a new user?
It begins with activation. The user pulls the insulating plastic tab from the battery compartment, sets the internal clock, and then an egg appears on the screen.
There is a mandatory waiting period at this stage.
Yes, the egg wiggles for several minutes, usually exactly 5 minutes before hatching. This waiting period is crucial mechanically because it establishes anticipation. Once hatched, the user must manage 3 primary internal meters.
Those being hunger, happy, and training.
Right. And in earlier models, the training meter was actually referred to as discipline.
How does the user interact with these specific meters to maintain the digital organism?
It requires specific care actions. To fill the hunger meter, the user feeds the pet meals. These are typically represented as a loaf of bread or a hamburger in the international versions. Or they can provide snacks, such as candy or cake.
The distinction between meals and snacks is functionally important to the algorithm.
It is the core of the health system. Meals fill hunger, but do not increase happiness. Snacks increase happiness, but do not fill hunger effectively. And overfeeding snacks can lead to the pet becoming overweight or developing a toothache.
There is also a hygiene mechanic.
Cleaning is an essential function. The pet will systematically leave droppings on the screen, which must be removed by the user to prevent illness. Illness is visually indicated by a skull icon appearing next to the pet.
You mentioned the discipline or training meter. How is that behavioral mechanic implemented?
This is a mechanic that adds psychological depth to the simulation. The user must scold the pet when it demands attention without actually needing it.
Meaning when it triggers an alert, but its hunger and happy meters are not empty.
Exactly. It mimics a child throwing a tantrum. If the user fails to discipline the pet in these specific moments, the discipline meter remains low. Conversely, in later hardware models, a praise option was added for when the pet performs a good deed or is actively sulking.
And these cumulative actions strictly dictate the physical evolution of the creature.
They do. The pet transitions through distinct life stages. It goes from baby to child, then teenager, and finally adult. Some versions also include a senior or special stage.
The algorithm tracks the care history to determine the final form.
That is the key detail. The outcome of the adult form, which specific character you end up with, is strictly determined by the quality of care provided during the earlier stages. It creates a rigid system of accountability.
For example, attentive care results in a different sprite than neglectful care.
Right. If you are highly attentive and disciplined, you might get the best character, which is often considered to be Mamechi. If you're neglectful, you will get completely different, often less desirable characters. This mechanic meant that no 2 user experiences were exactly the same, which strongly encouraged users to compare their results with peers.
We must discuss the concept of mortality within the parameters of the device.
The mortality mechanic is central to the entire experience. These digital entities can die. Causes of death include poor care, old age, sickness, and in certain specific versions, even predators.
This is a radical departure from traditional toys of that era.
It was entirely unprecedented. A physical doll does not die if you leave it on a shelf for a week. A Tamagotchi does. It introduced genuine, irreversible stakes to the gameplay loop.
There is a notable cultural difference in how this death state was portrayed between the Japanese and English hardware versions.
There is. In the original Japanese versions, death was depicted visually with a ghost and a headstone. It was a direct, albeit cartoonish, representation of mortality.
How was this localized for the Western markets?
In the English-language versions, this was altered to depict an angel at death. This was likely done to soften the concept for a Western audience, or perhaps to imply a return to their home alien planet, rather than a permanent cessation of existence.
And if the creature reaches this death state, what is the protocol for the user?
The user can reset the life cycle. This is done by pressing the physical A and C buttons simultaneously. This specific combination restarts the internal game clock with a new egg, allowing the user to try again and perhaps achieve a different evolution result.
Moving to 1997, the product escalated into a global phenomenon. What was the measurable scale of the consumer frenzy?
It was immense by any retail standard. Bandai sold 40 million units worldwide in the first 2 years alone. Of that total, approximately 12 million were sold in the US and Canada.
The sheer velocity of those sales created a scarcity that only fueled the demand further.
It became a self-perpetuating cycle of demand. The logistics could not keep up.
This demand created significant operational issues for Bandai's own workforce in Japan.
It did. The item was so highly sought after that Bandai employees were actually banned from carrying bags with the corporate logo in public.
Due to security concerns.
Yes, there was a genuine, documented fear that employees would be targeted for theft or harassment by people desperate to acquire the device. It speaks to the level of consumer hysteria surrounding the product at that time.
This level of engagement led psychologists to coin a new term, known as the Tamagotchi effect.
Correct. The Tamagotchi effect is a term used in psychology to describe the development of genuine emotional attachment to digital agents.
It validated the concept of human-computer emotional bonding.
It absolutely did. It showed that if an artificial object displays a need, even a rigidly programmed, algorithmic need, humans will instinctively respond with care and eventually form affection for it.
Schools became a major battleground. Teachers reported massive class disruptions because the devices required active care during school hours.
Because the early generation models lacked a pause feature. Exactly. Since the original Generation 1 and Generation 2 models could die in less than half a day without care, students were constantly distracted. If they left the device in their locker, they would return at the end of the day to a dead pet. This logistical reality led to widespread, official bans of the devices in school districts across the globe.
There were also reports regarding the psychological fallout of these digital deaths.
There were widespread reports of children holding actual physical funerals for their digital pets. There were also urban legends and allegations regarding extreme emotional distress.
Including stories of self-harm.
Yes, including very dark rumors of suicide related to the death of a Tamagotchi. While these specific extreme cases are strictly categorized as urban legends or unverified reports, the sheer fact that such stories circulated widely indicates that the emotional weight placed on the device by society was factual and significant.
Despite the controversy and the bans, the product received high institutional praise.
It did. For example, in 1997, the Swedish Retail Institute officially named it the Christmas gift of the year. That period was the absolute peak of the initial cultural fad.
However, this peak was immediately followed by a severe market crash. We are now looking at the period from 1998 to 2004.
The market collapsed almost as quickly as it rose. By 1998, the craze had subsided entirely. The financial consequence for Bandai was severe. They suffered a 6 billion yen financial loss.
Let us examine the economics of that. What were the primary causes of this massive financial loss?
It was a textbook case of supply chain mismanagement and what economists call the bullwhip effect. Bandai engaged in massive overproduction in anticipation of continued infinite demand.
They extrapolated their initial sales curve too far into the future.
Exactly. Furthermore, there's a fatal miscommunication in the retail supply chain. Consumers had been making reservations at multiple different retailers to ensure they got at least one unit.
Creating a falsely inflated metric of demand.
Right. When the manufacturing finally caught up and the product arrived, consumers only bought their one desired unit and canceled the rest. This left retailers and ultimately Bandai with massive warehouses of unsold inventory that they could not move at any price.
During this commercial downtime for the primary brand, there was a notable spin-off.
Yes, Bandai and Wheezy pivoted and created the digital monster, which is widely known as Digimon.
This was designed for a different target demographic.
It was explicitly designed as a masculine counterpart to the Tamagotchi. Instead of focusing on just nurturing, it focused heavily on training for competitive battling. While the Tamagotchi brand languished in warehouses, Digimon found its own massive independent success, eventually spawning a television anime and a long-running franchise that still exists.
The primary franchise did not stay dormant indefinitely, however. It was strategically revived in 2004.
This was the launch of the Tamagotchi Connection series. It was known as Tamagotchi Plus in the Japanese market. It was officially released in March 2004.
Bandai approached this specific launch very differently from a business perspective.
They were incredibly cautious. Bandai used subdued, targeted advertising to deliberately avoid the overheating and inventory disaster of the 1996 launch. They wanted a sustainable product life cycle, not just another flash in the pan.
So they focused on controlled growth.
Yes, they focused on longevity and building a user community rather than just generating blind retail hype.
This 2004 model introduced a significant technological leap for the hardware.
The defining feature of the Connection series was infrared communication, or RDA. This piece of hardware allowed for social gameplay. Devices could be physically pointed at each other to link up,
allowing data transfer between distinct units.
Correct. Users could play mini-games against each other, exchange digital gifts, and establish recorded friendships in the device's memory. This moved the user experience from a strictly solitary one to a communal network.
This connectivity inherently allowed for the introduction of complex marriage and lineage mechanics.
It did. While breeding was technically first seen in the earlier Osuchi and Masuchi models, the Connection series popularized it globally. Pets could now marry,
either via the infrared connection with another player or through an NPC.
Exactly, through a matchmaker character programmed into the game if you did not have a second physical device. They would then produce offspring. The adult parent would guide the baby on screen for 24 hours and then leave the device,
leaving the user with the next generation.
Right. This created a generational gameplay loop where the user cares for an ongoing lineage rather than a single mortal entity. It brilliantly solved the problem of user fatigue. When one pet grew up, the next generation began automatically, keeping the user permanently engaged with the hardware.
Let us advance into the era of technological evolution and market diversification. This covers the timeline from 2008 to 2023.
This modern era begins with a major display upgrade, the introduction of the color screen. In November 2008, Bandai released the Tamagotchi Plus Color.
This was heavily restricted geographically.
It was a Japan-only release, but it was the first model to fully move away from the traditional black and white pixelated LCD screen, offering a much richer, illuminated visual experience.
This hardware shift was followed by several other Japanese domestic models.
Yes, it established a new baseline. We saw the Tamagotchi ID in 2009, the Ps in 2012, and the 4U in 2014. The 4U was particularly notable from a hardware perspective because it introduced NFC technology.
Near-field communication.
Correct. This allowed the device to connect wirelessly not just to other Tamagotchi units, but directly to modern smartphones. Users could download specific items and visual accessories by physically touching their device to compatible NFC points out in the real world.
During this specific period, the internal genetics mechanic was significantly refined.
This was a major software innovation found in models like the Tamagotchi MX in 2016, and later, the international Tamagotchi ON. In these versions, the digital offspring dynamically inherit physical traits from both parents.
It functions as a rudimentary genetic algorithm.
Exactly. It allows for the mixing of visual characteristics, meaning the user can create unique-looking pets based on whom they choose to marry. This created millions of potential visual permutations. It made each user's pet feel truly unique, rather than just selecting from a static roster of 30 characters.
The modern international market saw significant activity between 2019 and 2023.
The Tamagotchi ON, which was released in 2019, was the first international color release. It modernized the connectivity by featuring Bluetooth to interface with smartphones, allowing users to transfer their creature to a dedicated mobile app for expanded gameplay.
Then, in 2021, the hardware expanded further with the Tamagotchi Pix. What defined the Pix?
The Pix integrated actual camera functionality into the plastic casing. It allowed for augmented reality features where users could take real-world photos and composite their digital pet into the image.
It also altered the data transfer methodology.
Yes, it replaced the infrared and Bluetooth data transfer systems with optical QR codes. Users would generate a QR code on their device's screen, which another user could visually scan with their camera to receive a gift or a character visit.
There's also a notable smartwatch adaptation during this window.
That was the Tamagotchi Smart, released in 2021. It was a Japan-exclusive smartwatch form factor, attempting to compete with modern wearables. It utilized physical Tamasma cards.
What was their function?
They were small, physical plastic keys that plug directly into the side of the watch to load expansion content and new characters into the device's memory. A way to sell physical DLC, essentially.
And moving to 2023.
We saw the Tamagotchi Uni. This was a massive technical leap, as was the first model to feature built-in Wi-Fi functionality. It introduced the Tamiverse.
A dedicated online ecosystem.
Yes, an online environment specifically built for global interaction between users. It also allowed for downloadable content updates directly over the Wi-Fi connection, meaning Bandai could patch the device firmware and add seasonal events remotely without requiring physical cards or phone apps.
This brings our analysis to the contemporary landscape, covering 2024 through early 2026.
There have been several key strategic developments recently. In 2024, Bandai celebrated the 20th anniversary of the Connection series with a targeted re-release of that specific 2004 model.
Relying heavily on the nostalgia of the original user base.
Exactly, tapping into the adults who were children when the Connection originally launched. There was also a major corporate collaboration with Hello Kitty to celebrate her 50th anniversary in 2024, merging the two massive IPs.
In 2025, a new mainline hardware device was released, the Tamagotchi Paradise.
The Tamagotchi Paradise was released internationally in July 2025, and specifically in the US market in August 2025. This device features a unique hardware innovation known as a zoom dial.
Conceptually, it represents a shift in the user interface.
It does. Recent models like the Uni had treated the digital character almost as a little person, with a structured life, a house, and a job. The Paradise explicitly reverts to the original concept of a pet. The physical zoom dial allows users to mechanically navigate the room and interface, adding a tactile analog element back to the digital experience.
The connectivity architecture on the Paradise also references the past.
Yes, it surprisingly returns to using physical prongs for connection between devices.
Eschewing wireless protocols entirely.
Right, this is a direct, deliberate reference to the original Osuchi and Masuchi models from the late 90s. It is a strategic move away from the invisible, seamless connectivity of modern Wi-Fi and Bluetooth back to something highly tangible and deliberate.
Bandai also expanded their legacy offerings in 2025.
They released the Tamagotchi Angel as part of the original line, officially classifying it as Generation 3. This strategy keeps the vintage 90s gameplay active and available at retail alongside the modern complex advancements.
Beyond the hardware releases, 2025 was a significant year for the brand's cultural legacy.
It was a milestone year. In 2025, the Strong National Museum of Play officially inducted Tamagotchi into the World Video Game Hall of Fame.
What was the specific citation provided by the museum for this induction?
The museum recognized the device for providing measurable feelings of connection and caring. It was cited as offering a necessary peaceful respite from the highly combat-heavy video game market of the 1990s. The committee acknowledged that Tamagotchi literally created a new vocabulary for how human beings interact with machines.
The brand has also maintained a consistent presence in broader media.
It has. There was a notable, highly accurate reference in the 2022 animated film Turning Red, which is set in the year 2002. The protagonist owns a Tamagotchi that she names Robert Jr.,
demonstrating its ubiquity in the culture of that specific era.
Precisely. There were also dedicated animated films, such as Tamagotchi the movie released in 2007. These ongoing media appearances cement its status not just as a plastic toy, but as a permanent cultural marker.
Let us summarize the overall impact of this franchise for the listener. From a purely business perspective, what are the core lessons to be extracted here?
It serves as a masterclass case study in managing a boom, bust, and stabilize economic cycle. Bandai successfully managed to shift the product from a singular, highly volatile toy fad into a sustainable, multi-decade brand franchise. They have released over 50 distinct versions.
It required strict adaptation.
They learned the hard way that carefully controlling supply while simultaneously innovating on the core mechanics is absolutely essential for long-term retail longevity.
And regarding the technological progression of the hardware,
The hardware path is a remarkably clear reflection of broader consumer tech trends over the last 30 years. It steadily moved from a simple segmented LCD to infrared, then to NFC, Bluetooth, camera integration, Wi-Fi, and finally into an early metaverse concept.
it miniaturized broader computing trends.
The Tamagotchi has effectively mirrored the exact technical evolution of the mobile phone, just implemented on a much smaller, application-specific scale.
Finally, we must evaluate the psychological legacy of the device.
The Tamagotchi completely validated the virtual pet genre. Its mechanical influence is clearly seen in subsequent, wildly successful software games like Nintendogs and mobile applications like Pooh.
It proved a theory of engagement.
It proved the enduring, cross-cultural appeal of digital nurturing. It provided empirical evidence that humans can and will project life and affection onto inanimate objects, provided the algorithmic feedback loop is designed correctly to mimic biological dependence.
It is a remarkable history of technological and psychological intersection. I urge you to consider how your own interactions with modern algorithms mirror these early caretaking loops.
Indeed, Tamagotchi represents the first true mass-market success of digital companionship. It proved definitively that humans can form genuine emotional bonds with lines of code.
We acknowledge the long and complex history of this device. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.